distinguished guests, members of our global community. I'm Vera Jelinek, the Divisional Dean of the Center for Global Affairs at the NYU School of Professional Studies. It's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to this very special event featuring His Excellency, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and a high-level panel on disarmament. Greetings to our academic community, students, alumni, faculty, and staff who are here. It's wonderful to also see here representatives of missions, diplomatic missions to the United Nations, NGOs, advocacy groups that work on disarmament. And it is a special pleasure to have NYU President Andrew Hamilton and his wife Jenny with us this afternoon. And a very special welcome to Mrs. Ban, who is also with us in the audience. Our center especially cherishes this opportunity in light of our own commitment to identifying and forming solutions to the same global challenges that face the United Nations. This affinity is manifest in all our programs, from our Masters in Global Affairs to professional pathway courses and public programs. Among our faculty are current and former UN staff, and they bring their practical experience into the classroom. Our students take internships and secure positions with the United Nations and its agencies. They enroll in courses on the work of the UN, including annual travel to the UN in Geneva for briefings and research. Our outreach to the UN also includes workshops offered annually to diplomats first entering the UN system. There's much more to say, but for now, suffice it to say that this afternoon's program has special meaning for me and our global affairs community. And now I would like to invite Dean Dennis DiLorenzo of the NYU School of Professional Studies to the podium.
Thank you, Vera. I have a distinct honor today. Today, my job is to introduce a man that truly needs no introduction. Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. Throughout the world, few people have been as principled and passionate an advocate for disarmament as he has. Over the course of the last decade, the Secretary General has worked tirelessly to raise the profile of disarmament, built alliances and partnerships with regional groupings, civil society, and the private sector, and has undertaken countless outreaches to UN member states. His 5-point proposal on nuclear disarmament offers a roadmap for how to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons, including NPT negotiations, Security Council discussions regarding security issues in the disarmament process, and a robust set of necessary safety complementary measures. Ban Ki-moon was the first Secretary General to visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as the nuclear test site in Kazakhstan. In March 2013, in response to the horrific allegations of the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic, Secretary General Ban launched an investigation into those allegations. He has been unequivocal in his advocacy for a world free of chemical weapons and was the first to officially link disarmament and development through his Sustainable Development Goals. Please join me in welcoming Secretary General Ban. Round of applause.
Thank you, Dean Dennis DiLorenzo, for your very kind introduction. And Dr. Andrew Hamilton, Honorable President of New York University, thank you very much. Great pleasure to see you again. Congratulations on your due responsibility. And Madam Hamilton, Divisional Dean Vera Jelinek, thank you very much. Distinguished faculties, members, and students, and distinguished ambassadors to the United Nations, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to have this opportunity to share some thoughts of my own and what United Nations has been doing on arms control and disarmament with distinguished professors and the students here today. You have helped to prepare future generations to address global challenges through multilateral cooperation. Your outstanding teaching and research have deepened the public's understanding of the work of the United Nations. And I salute you all for all of this and much more, what you have been doing and you will continue to do. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to focus on the future of multilateral disarmament. Quite simply, disarmament is facing a crisis. This afternoon, I want to outline a number of steps to help put the process back on track. That need is ever more urgent as we scan the security horizon around the world. Every day, we are confronted with the stories of indiscriminate bombardment of civilians, more allegations of use of chemical weapons, ceaseless development, and even testing of nuclear weapons, even in the 21st century. I'm more convinced than ever that a fresh start in disarmament will strengthen our overall system of international peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, disarmament is a topic long associated with the United Nations. For me, the issue is also deeply personal. My own country, the Republic of Korea, experienced the ravages of war in 1950 and continues to face a threat from nuclear weapons, missiles, ballistic missiles, and many other conventional weapons. It borders the only country, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, normally we say DPRK, which has conducted a nuclear test in this century. And the DPRK continues to build up its ballistic missiles, imperiling regional security and threatening global security. As a Foreign Service officer, during my time, I have been deeply involved in promoting entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT. I served as the second chairman of this CTBT when I was stationed in Vienna. And I have been involved in this announcing very historic joint declaration between Republic of Korea and DPRK on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, which was adopted in December 31st, 1991, which was ratified February 1992. Thereafter, I participated in implementing this joint declaration on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But unfortunately, we have not been able to do that. I will be more specific on this matter. In my time in the United Nations as a Secretary General, as I was introduced by the Dean Lorenzo, I was the first Secretary General to visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At that time, I did not know that the United States ambassador to Japan has not even visited there such a long time, 6 decades, longer than 6 decades, after after these nuclear weapons were dropped, used. Only when Secretary General of the United Nations wanted to visit, at that time, first time, US ambassador just came to Hiroshima. That was quite, I could not understand at that time. Now, this year, during G7 summit, the President Obama paid a tribute to all these victims. That was, I think, again, historic. Therefore, I and President Obama made some historic visit to this place. As I traveled to the sites of tragic, and I also traveled to the tragic nuclear accident at Chernobyl and Fukushima, Japan. And as was introduced, I was the first person, first world leader, not to mention Secretary General of the United Nations. No world leaders has ever visited Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan. I was so much horrified when I was standing in the middle of this Semipalatinsk. If there's any question, I will explain, but because of time constraint, I'm not going to go in detail how I felt. As again was introduced, I launched for the first time again to establish an expert-level investigation team into the use of chemical weapons in Syria. I appointed the very distinguished expert scholar Åke Sällström of Sweden. You must have heard his name. That triggered a series of events resulting in unprecedented international action to eliminate that country's chemical weapons program. In 2008, very early in my tenure, I put forward a 5-point plan to revitalize the international disarmament agenda based on key principles. First, disarmament must enhance security. Second, disarmament must be reliably verified. Third, disarmament must be rooted in legal obligations. And fourth, disarmament must be visible to the public. And fifth, disarmament must anticipate emerging dangers from conventional weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, over the history of the United Nations, disarmament has been approached on two separate tracks. The first track relies on a so-called comprehensive effort to address all major disarmament challenges in a single integrated framework. This school of thought teaches that all disarmament issues are linked. For example, negotiations over nuclear and conventional weapons should take place in parallel. Second track has focused on what have been called partial measures, which is an incremental or piecemeal approach to disarmament. For example, before negotiating on elimination of nuclear weapons, you must first have a cessation of the arms race, an end to nuclear testing, a gradual sequenced reduction of nuclear stockpiles. The list goes on building block at a time. This may be seen as a practical way before you can have a comprehensive nuclear deal. One novel variation has been the recent initiative to negotiate a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, a measure that its supporters believe will contribute to the eventual elimination of nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, there is a deep division among member states over which steps would prove most fruitful. On the one hand, nuclear weapon states, along with many of their allies argue that they have taken steps to reduce their arsenals. On the other hand, non-nuclear weapon states point to the lack of disarmament negotiations, the persistence of thousands of nuclear weapons, and plans for modernizing existing nuclear arsenals decades into the future with costs that run well over $1 trillion. This is a huge, huge money. I've been arguing that just a fraction of $1 trillion will have enough of these sustainable development goals implemented. We can also easily address climate change agreement implementation to help developing countries. We've been working since 2009 to mobilize $100 billion that we have targeted by 2020. It's an 11-year plan to mobilize $100 billion. Now we are talking about $1 trillion of just managing all these stockpiles and improving their capacities. We have achieved some progress on outlawing certain specific weapons like cluster munitions and landmines, as well as success in negotiating a conventional arms trade treaty. Again, we see, while there are many disappointing and frustrating processes, we have seen recently some positive things. Arms trade treaty. We negotiated, I think, 2 years. Finally, on the second year, we were able to have this agreement signed, and following year, it was ratified by all. It became into effect. It became effective. We saw such things in climate change. After 20 years of negotiation, it got speed, and we made it happen. Then November 4th this year, we got this Paris Agreement enter into force. There have been caps on number of deployed strategic nuclear weapons, the closure of several nuclear test sites, and a halt to the production of fissile material for weapons in most possessor states at least. But persistent differences over disarmament have led to frustrating and, I would add, shameful results. The UN disarmament machinery is locked in chronic stalemate. Perhaps nothing better illustrates this failure than the Conference of Disarmament in Geneva. As a Secretary General, since the first year, I have been going to Geneva many times and addressing Conference of Disarmament. You will be surprised. Over 2 decades, they have not been able to adopt the program of work. Can you believe? Not to mention, let alone the progress in the work. They have not been able to adopt the agenda. 20 years, it exists. And I've been warning them, if you behave like this way, we'll have to bring this Conference of Disarmament, the discussions in Conference of Disarmament, we'll have to bring to some other venue, some other forum. But they don't listen. Just 1 or 2 countries, because of consensus system, just 1 country can block whole 193 member states' will. This is a totally unacceptable situation. The costs of allowing this kind of a status quo, non-action, they are still persisting. This is a very frustrating one. Chronic increases in military expenditures, out of control arms race, new regional instabilities, enhanced risk of proliferation, growing mistrust among nations, and potential catastrophic terrorist threat from non-state actors. Diplomacy and democracy can work to solve sensitive security problems like the historic agreement on the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Even while this deal remains in its infancy, we must guard against cynicism and focus on ensuring that the agreement lives up to our highest expectations. You cannot expect in our real world the perfect agreement, perfect treaty. Despite some challenges, some weaknesses, sustaining this agreement is the best way to ensure that Iran's nuclear program remains peaceful. This may be my answer, if asked, to some of the debate which are now being discussed immediately after this election, presidential election here. Yet, in the absence of more general progress in this field, more intractable problems such as the irresponsible and reckless nuclear and missile activities of the DPRK, this will only grow. This will not only undermine regional peace and security, but also imperil much of the fragile progress we have made in building strong norms against nuclear weapons. There is a better way, and I would like to offer one today. It is based on the long-accepted goal of disarmament as a means to ensure human survival and eliminate the danger of war. Building on my 2008 proposal, 5-point proposal, I believe the world needs to see action in 5 specific areas to achieve sustainable security through the progressive demilitarization of international affairs. The goal is an international system that truly ensures the peaceful resolution of disputes as called for in the UN Charter, rather than to use the use of force. The first, let me say that priority must remain the elimination of nuclear weapons, which continues to pose an existential threat to humanity. States must find a clearly defined and time-bound framework to achieve this, either through a nuclear weapons convention or a set of mutually reinforcing instruments. Fundamental questions have been raised. How will a prohibition treaty help induce nuclear possessors to move toward elimination? Why is it so difficult to delegitimize nuclear weapons in the same manner as other weapons of mass destruction, such as chemical and biological weapons? Humanity deserves satisfactory answers to these questions. Both nuclear and non-nuclear states must work to narrow differences and to find common ground. Ultimately, reaching this universal objective will require comprehensive, inclusive, and interactive and constructive approaches. In this regard, the Russian Federation and the United States, who together hold the largest nuclear arsenals, I think 95% of declared nuclear weapons in the world are in the hands of these 2 countries, they must resume a real dialogue on reducing all types of nuclear weapons. In the meantime, all states should pursue policies that are fully compatible with the objective of achieving a world without nuclear weapons. Second, beyond the challenge of nuclear disarmament, we must strive for the universality of instruments aimed at stemming the growing risk of terrorism using chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear materials. It is time for a new push for universal membership in the Chemical and Biological Weapons Convention. it is an affront to the conscience of humankind that chemical weapons continue to exist, let alone are actually being used, as we have so tragically witnessed in Syria. Still, we have all these allegations that chemical weapons are still being used. And I'm very happy to see that the Security Council has extended the mandate of joint investigative mechanism by another 1 year. Third, the Security Council must fulfill its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security by addressing the real and present challenges posed by weapons of mass destruction. We need unity in confronting menace. Those who violate the non-proliferation commitment set by the Council or use chemical or other inhuman weapons must be held accountable. There must be no impunity. The Council must also fulfill its broader mandate in relation to disarmament and arms regulation. Number 4, the international community must embrace the humanitarian, human rights, social, and economic imperatives for disarmament and arms regulation, building on our progress in outlawing inhuman weapons and adopting the Arms Trade Treaty. This includes enhancing protection of civilians by ending the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, facilitating sustainable development and peace by eradicating the illicit arms trade. As I have often said, the world is overarmed and peace is underfunded. You must have heard all my repetition of this word, catchphrase. I'm going to repeat again, world is overarmed and peace is underfunded. The objective of security should be reoriented toward the purely defensive capabilities and the fulfillment of peacekeeping responsibilities. Number 5, we must widen the scope to include other emerging technologies with the potentially destabilizing military applications. These include armed drones, cyber weapons, space weapons, new types of biological weapons made through genetic engineering, strategic missiles defense capabilities, and other technologies such as autonomous weapons. The best time to achieve our goals is to before an arms race begins rather than after it is too late. The approach that I have outlined today, these 5 approaches, can help move us closer to our shared dream of achieving all the solemn goals of the UN Charter with respect to international peace and security, and not just in the field of disarmament. For 10 years, I have strived to advance such goals as a Secretary General. Soon, I will turn over these responsibilities to a very able successor, Antonio Guterres. I urge you to give him full support and cooperation, and also to the United Nations, to advance the great cause of disarmament. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished professors, together, let us continue until we reach our destination, a world free of nuclear weapons, a world free of all weapons of mass destruction or massive disruption, and a world of safer, more secure, and better world for all the people. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General Bond. On behalf of all of us in this room and humanity at large, let me thank you for your efforts to creating a peaceful world. Thank you. Another round of applause, please. Before we move on to questions, I also must introduce a woman who needs no introductions, Edith Lederer. Edith is an award-winning journalist for the Associated Press who has worked on nearly every continent, covering wars, famines, nuclear issues, and political upheavals. She holds the distinct honor of being the first woman that AP sent to a full-time correspondent during the Vietnam War. Since 1998, Edith has served as AP's chief correspondent at the United Nations, reporting on the diplomatic side of conflicts, including Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Congo, and South Sudan. She also has reported on major global issues, including nuclear programs, climate change, combating poverty, and women's rights. Engagement with these issues, and especially Mr. Bond's advocacy in the promotion of peace and security as Secretary General, align with NYU, the School of Professional Studies, and the Center for Global Affairs' international community and commitment to service in the world. This is consistent with our mission. It's consistent with the course of study that we offer. And as Vera mentioned, in particular, CGA students prepare for careers in the UN and the international community in promotion of the same values of development, peace, and security. So now I would like to call back to the stage our Divisional Dean, Vera Jelinek, to moderate questions as we open the floor. Okay, and Edith, you're going to accept the questions. I apologize, sorry.
That's all right. You're forgiven. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. It's always nice to be back at university, particularly at my age. Secretary General Bond, you outlined a very, very ambitious new 5-point plan for the world. And you mentioned the recent election here in the United States. I wonder what your hopes and expectations are for the implementation of that agenda, including keeping the Iran nuclear agreement in light of Donald Trump being elected President of the United States and a new crop of populist leaders elsewhere in the world.
A lot of talks have been made during this hard-fighting presidential election. It's normal that during the election period, candidates, they just say something radical, unconventional things to attract the voters' mind. Having said that, having gone through all this, now it's time for President-elect Donald Trump to just sit and calmly and discuss with his advisors what to do to make sure that this great country continues to lead the nation, including this nuclear disarmament issues. One thing he said was about this nuclear deal with Iran. As I said earlier in my statement, there is no such a perfect agreement in this world. It doesn't simply exist that way. That's the ideal one. But I believe, to my mind, as a Secretary General, who have been involved in such a long time in nuclear disarmament, and even though I have not been directly involved in this negotiation, but these are P5, 5 permanent members, and European Union, and also Germany. I think they mobilized the best expert and highest negotiators, including John Kerry and many others. They've been discussing this matter. And I think it was a good agreement in terms of preventive diplomacy. And IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, has been regularly issuing reports of checking and verifying whether Iranian authorities, they are keeping their promises as agreed in this agreement. I think so far, I think it has been going on well. If there's any complaint, I've been hearing from Iranian leadership that the P5+1, they are not doing enough in relation to their implementation, like lifting sanctions, et cetera, et cetera. But I think all in all, they are closely working together. Then this kind of agreement, the integrity of this agreement should be preserved. After many years, as a result of all this implementation by both sides, they may sit down together and improve and do whatever which may be necessary. That may be a natural course of action.
The Secretary General doesn't have much time, so I would like to open the floor to questions. And I would ask questioners to please identify yourself and stick to the subject of disarmament. Would you please go to the microphone, which is right there?
Order from Global Society, and I do have a question related to climate change issue. Yesterday, President-elect Trump just have this announcement said he will have this 100-day plan. One part of that plan was about energy, and since I know, like in your turn, you worked so hard to push the corporations around this different countries to work on this issue, and what are UN going to do to prevent any setbacks on this climate change issue? And
thank you. He's got it. As I said, we don't have much time.
That's a very important question, very serious question. When I went to Marrakesh, Morocco, to participate in this climate change summit meeting, many delegations, they were concerned about what President-elect said. Many journalists, of course, are there. But my answer is that this is an agreement. 197 parties have agreed by consensus. It's like a unanimity. This is a very strange system, unrealistic system, but it worked. Among 196, at that time 196, now it has increased by one country, so 197, but at that time 196 parties, without any exception, they all agreed. At that time, if one country said no, then whole this negotiation might have been broken. It's a very difficult negotiation. So everybody agreed. Now, it's not the only government negotiators, government leaders. It's now business communities, and particularly people on the ground, civil society. They demand that this climate change agreement, Paris Agreement, must be preserved, must be implemented. There was a Marrakesh, a very strong Marrakesh proclamation, action proclamation. And then, if I may say, in case of United States, other countries are all committed. United States, major companies like General Motors and all the Coca-Cola or General Mills, etc., etc., they have gone by 100% renewable energy, 100%. And major cities, provinces like California, state of Washington, Las Vegas, Nashville, or many cities, they are committed to go on sustainable energy, keeping this climate change. Now, all the business communities are retooling their business operations toward low carbon, decarbonization. They know that the low carbon economy, climate resilient operation is the answer, not only to have a prosperous business operations, but for the people, for this earth. So answer is clear. The science, the world's best scientists, at least 3,000 scientists, they have confirmed consecutively 5 times during the last 20 years through their scientific reports that climate change has been caused by human behavior. Climate change is approaching much, much faster than you may expect. Therefore, it's only natural that we must fully implement this agreement. Yeah.
You have to promise me the next question is on disarmament. Please tell us your name and ask your question.
Right. Hi. My name is Arya Das, and Secretary General Ban, it's such an inspiration and honor to meet you. I've come from India for my master's here, and my question. I've come from India.
Yes.
Yeah, and my question is regarding the situation in India and Pakistan with respect to their having nuclear weapons outside of the NPT. And how do you believe that nations that are not within the nuclear non-proliferation treaty framework, how do you believe that nations like India and Pakistan, who have a system of deterrence at this moment, and they have conflicts with respect to the situation in Kashmir, go about their form of disarmament? And how do you believe that the UN can play a role with respect to this particular issue? Thank you.
There are some known nuclear weapon states, like India, Pakistan. And there are some countries, but whether known or not, but North Korea is also, but the international community does not recognize North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. But India and Pakistan somehow, everybody knows that they have tested and they have nuclear weapons. And it happened when I was working in India. And also when it happened when I was ambassador working in Vienna, where IAEA is there, when Pakistan tested nuclear weapons. So I was on the scene all the times when discussions were taking place. It's important that they should be part of this, system rather than staying outside of this. But only thing we can appreciate is that there have not been any further testings. Unlike North Korea, they have been testing already 5 times. So it's important that considering the serious and negative consequences, immense consequences of nuclear weapons, all those nuclear weapons, first of all, our targets should be all eliminated from this earth, but if not, we have to have a strict control. And that's what we are now talking about, arms control and disarmament. These 2 processes should go until we make sure that there is no nuclear weapons. Yeah.
We only have time for one more question, but, well, I tell you what, why don't you each ask a very short question, very short, on disarmament, and the Secretary General will answer both.
First, I want to say thank you for the constructive speech, and my name is Huo Bo. I'm a law student from China, and my question is, with a series of black swan incidents going on now in the international society, from Brexit last year, and also the U.S. election, and also the French election, would you see there is a growing trend of mistrust among the great nations in the world, and correspondingly an increasing trend of direct conflicts, which might lead to
We get the message. I said short.
My question is the United Nations concerned about the growing trend of direct conflicts among nations, which might bring to the next world war? And if it is, then what would be the preventative measures UN would take to deal with this situation? Thank you.
Short.
I promise it's going to be short. I'm Saeed Saber Ibrahimi from NYU, and my question is with the concept of deterrence, whether nuclear weapons have kept us actually away from World War III. What's your opinion on that?
Mr. Secretary
Ah,
General.
okay, that's fine.
That's it.
The deterrence, if the nuclear weapons have actually kept us from going to World War III, because a lot of people believe in that.
There's one lady.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just, no more now. After that, okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was so inspired by your profound insight and precious opinions. Since the attention of disarmament issue has been slowed down, especially among youth, however, the risk and danger itself has not changed at all. So can you give a short message to youth who definitely will face with the disarmament issue now and in the future?
Thank you.
Okay,
You didn't tell us who you were.
Oh yeah, my name is Ji Yang. I'm a graduate student at NYU SPS, majoring in global affairs.
This, I do not want to even think about any confrontation by nuclear weapons states. Nuclear weapons were used first time and last time in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But I think there is a system, even though there is a lack of political will to reduce and eliminate the nuclear weapons. But I believe that there is at least a minimum political will to control this one and safeguard the safety of nuclear weapons. That is one thing which we are a little bit conscious about that. Therefore, it's very important that all the countries who are known nuclear weapon state must do all they to control this one. At the same time, it's very important that all these nuclear weapons or materials are slipped into the hands of wrong hands, rogue states or rogue organizations like terrorist ISIL or whatever terrorist organization. That's a nightmare. We must do all we have to do to prevent all this confrontation. Now, there is no limit in deterrence. If you want to really make nuclear weapons to deter yourself, to protect yourself, it's what we say, mad things. There is a MAD, mutually assured destruction. If you have 100, then you may want to have 120, then you may want to have 130. This is some mad things, really. That somebody made a very good word. This is a mutually assured destruction. Therefore, it's a useless things, it's a mad things to increase nuclear stockpiles. Therefore, we have to make sure that we do not do that. There is no such perfect deterrence. The only perfect deterrence is that we get rid of all these nuclear weapons and do not manufacture any further. Then about the message to youth, that's quite simple. Youth, they are the leaders of our world, of our future. We are living in a very limited period, but whatever we are doing, whatever I'm doing, is to give a better world better opportunity, better hope, but to young people, then if this kind of nuclear weapons and threat of nuclear weapons and all this some nightmarish scenario that this may go into some other rogue states, that is something which we have to prevent with all our efforts. That's what our current generation leadership have to make sure that we work for our youth generation, younger generation. And count on the United Nations. We will do all what we should do. Thank you very much.
I'd like you all to thank the Secretary General. And I hope you will, before I finish, I hope you will stick around for the next panel, which will include the UN Disarmament Chief, Mr. Kim Won-soo, and the President, your President, has some closing words.
Ladies and gentlemen, it falls on me to bring this part of the afternoon to a close, and I want, on behalf of everyone in the room, to thank Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and his wife, Mrs. Ban, for making time in their busy schedule and for giving us a presentation on his compelling vision for achievable disarmament. We are just a few days away from Thanksgiving, and there are many things in these uncertain and strange times. There are nonetheless many things to give thanks for, and I would like, on behalf of all of you in the room and on behalf of all of NYU, to give thanks to the Secretary General for his decade-long service to the world as Secretary General to the United Nations. His energy, his efforts, his commitment have made these difficult times just that little more secure and safe. We thank you. We are enormously grateful for your service, Secretary General. May I thank you. May I also just very quickly thank everyone who's been involved in this afternoon, and especially let me thank Edith Lederer for her chairing of the discussion. As you've heard, this has been the combination of hard work from many people at SPS. We especially thank the Dean Dennis Di Lorenzo, the Center for Global Studies, Vera Jelinek, and all of the staff and students who've played such a key role. NYU is an international university. We have as our valued neighbors the United Nations. They provide a wonderful opportunity for this university with more international students than any other in America. This university with 13 sites around the world. The United Nations shares this city with us, and we are very pleased that it offers many opportunities for connections and collaborations with our faculty and our students. And again, Secretary General, we thank you for being here this afternoon. And ladies and gentlemen, a happy Thanksgiving to you all.